The moment I pushed through the heavy oak doors, the federal courtroom fell silent. My service dress jacket held my spine straight. Ribbons perfectly aligned, the polished metal catching the overhead lights. I felt eyes skim over my uniform before stopping on my rank. 3rd row. There they were. My father, Graham Hale, leaned toward my mother and let out his familiar wheezing laugh. Marilyn simply sighed and shook her head, wearing the same expression she'd always had whenever I embarrassed her in public, as though my uniform was nothing more than an elaborate costume. I kept walking. My heels clicked against the marble floor with calm, measured precision. Behind the prosecution table, I set down my folder and faced forward, letting the room stare. "All rise!" Judge Harrow entered, adjusted his glasses, and began reading the docket. Case 9-24-CR-081. The United States versus... His eyes landed on me. He stopped mid-sentence. The entire courtroom seemed to freeze. "Dear God," he whispered into the microphone. "Captain Hale, Operation Nightshade." The 2 U.S. Marshals standing beside the bench snapped to rigid attention. Somewhere behind me, my father's laugh died in his throat. 2 weeks earlier, they'd been laughing for real. Sunday dinner had been Blake's personal stage. My older brother leaned back in his chair, flashing that confident startup smile. "It's a bureaucratic mix-up," he'd said, making wire fraud and export violations sound like unpaid parking tickets. Dad grinned proudly. "My boy's lawyers will crush it." Blake looked at me. "Hey, legal eagle, maybe you can run down to the courthouse, file something for my team, or at least grab them coffee." The table erupted with laughter. Warm, certain, cruel in its effortless confidence. I smiled politely. Inside, though, a cold, professional fury clicked into place as neatly as a chambered round. Standing in that courtroom now, I felt that same click again. Only this time, it had teeth. People think silence is empty. In my world, silence is a weapon. My office wasn't some beige government cubicle. It was a windowless SCIF beneath Andrews, where phones stayed locked outside and the only sound came from filtered air. That was where Colonel Reich watched as I presented Blake Hale's case. Reis. I clicked to the first slide. "Good morning, sir. Subject, Blake Hale." Yeah. Saying his name in that room tasted like metal. "He routed controlled military components through a Dubai shell company. We have the wire transfers, SWIFT identifiers, and server logs obtained under the Nightshade warrant." A general's jaw tightened. Colonel Reich never looked away. "This isn't just fraud, Captain Nora," he said. "It's a breach. The platform he compromised protects our pilots." I answered. "One hole is enough." After the briefing, I crossed a line I'd spent my career respecting. I walked into Colonel Reich's office, stood at attention, and requested to recuse myself from prosecuting United States versus Hale. He gave one grim nod. "Right decision." I walked out feeling hollow, benched once again, just like I always had been at family dinners. Blake's civilian lawyers had no such ethical concerns. A week later, their motion to dismiss landed on our desks. Poisoned tree, improper warrant, an overzealous junior officer driven by a personal vendetta. In other words, my desk phone rang. Colonel Reich's voice was calm. "Your recusal applies to prosecution, not testimony. Judge Harrow wants the originating investigator sworn in." That evening, my mother called. Her voice was bright and brittle. "We're all coming tomorrow to support Blake." "Of course," I replied. "I'll see you there." I didn't spend the night preparing speeches. I opened my 200-page affidavit and highlighted every timestamp, every statute, every procedure, and every fact they dared challenge in open court. Taking the oath the next morning felt easy. The real weight sat behind me. My parents, Blake, the carefully crafted myth they'd built around him. Defense counsel stood. His $10,000 suit looked expensive enough to buy confidence. Your Honor, this investigation was amateur hour. Captain Noor Hale acted out of personal animosity toward my client. Judge Harrow never looked at him. He looked at me. Captain Hale authored the Nightshade Investigative Framework, he said. We teach it. I opened my binder. My voice stayed calm. Dates, IP addresses, export control classifications, wire transfers, server logs. The exact paragraph of the Arms Export Control Act Blake had violated while joking about coffee at Sunday dinner. When the defense attorney tried to interrupt, Judge Harrow cut him off. Let her finish! Then came the Dubai Shell Company's banking records. Blake's smile disappeared. Oh, my father's never returned. And my mother's hands drifted towards her throat, searching for something to hold on to. Cross-examination never happened. The defense attorney slowly sat back down, his face drained of colour. Judge Harrow lifted the gavel. The sound echoed through the courtroom like a vault door closing. Motion denied. Bail denied. Mr. Hale is remanded into federal custody. The marshal stepped forward. The handcuffs clicked shut. Sharp, final, far too loud. Blake looked at me one last time. His eyes were wet. I didn't move. Outside the courthouse, Colonel Reich was waiting. He gave me a single nod. Done! Behind us, my parents remained in the gallery, staring at me as though I were a complete stranger. I walked into the cold winter sunlight. My uniform stayed straight. My steps stayed steady. And for the first time in my life, the silence belonged to me. Weeks later, Blake accepted a plea agreement. 15 years, signed in black ink. An email from my father arrived. 2 words. Proud, sorry. I archived it without opening the attachment. Some victories don't rebuild a family. They simply prove who was telling the truth all along.